ask me, what's the key ingredient in success, and or what's talent mean to you? Talent to me just means passion. Because if you have an undying passion, and you're virtuous and you have the right kind of principles in your life, you're gonna do well. It's impossible not to. It's a perfect equation to do well. But then you have to understand what's doing well mean. So I was fortunate because I started teaching at Jacobs, and I was meeting CEOs and vice presidents and all these guys. And I'm like, man, guy's got what I thought. He's got a big house. He's got an AMG. He flies first class. Man, he's living. But then they'd start to kind of put their stories on me and stuff, because I've always been that person where people have. I could be in a grocery store and someone's going to find me and tell me about their divorce. It just, for whatever reason, it happens to me. All right, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. These guys have everything I've tried to attain and think about doing, but they're not happy. So, it was kind of eye-opening. And then I left Jacobs and went back to Canada and started at the Club Link Academy, which is at Glen Abbey, which is where they host the Canadian Open for 25 years. And started teaching and got really into junior golfers and kind of young mini tour players in the area. And started studying a lot more about psychology. Start to try to empirically recognize, okay, I've taught forever on why I want the elbow in this position and it's worked. Now I need to understand why the elbow in that position actually works, rather than just saying, oh look, I'm Sean Foley, put your elbow here, you're pretty good like Sean O'Hare. That's not good. I mean, Sean O'Hare was freaking good before I met him. Okay? And so was Stephen Ames, and so was Hunter Mahan, and so was Justin Rose. They were unbelievable. The percentage that I've added to their career, all I've done is brought out of them what they already had. They just lost it. They didn't see it that they had it anymore. You know what I mean? So it's very rare you teach a tour player to go from hitting at 290 to 330. It just doesn't really happen, because there's only going to be about 1% of the male population will ever get a drive 330. So but the thing is, what's happened from the gurus, the so-called gurus, and I hate that word. I will never ever let people describe me as a guru. Is they've done an excellent job to, one, have a method, all right? If I had 5 people here come for a lesson and you guys all talked after, you might even think that it wasn't me that day, because it's so different. But I'm talking to individuals. You learn differently, you do all that. So as soon as you say, okay, you're going to start on your left side, stay on your left side, and keep moving on to your left side, you're automatically macro grading. Okay, that's automatically stagnant tilt. Well, I can look back to like 1915 when Ernest Jones came back from World War I and had his right leg blown off. And he was a teaching instructor, the golf instructor, golf professional. And he came back and all he had was his left leg. And I read this book when I was like 15. And all he had was his left leg. And it became quite obvious to me, like, look, when I started like this and I ended up all the way over here, I couldn't hit the ball very solid. I hit it decent far, but I never hit the ground the same every time. And then I'd watch like great players, and even though they kind of hit it offline, they always hit it solid. So here's Ernest Jones talking about he's come back from war and he's hitting it further and straighter on one leg. So that's what he wrote his book about. Now, I don't think we'd ever know who Ernest Jones was if he had this leg blown off, because you can't really do the same as you can unless you're left-handed. So nothing's new under the sun. Like I've never met a person who's ever had a single original thought. And these things I'm telling you about my principles and my philosophies, they come from Dr. King, Malcolm X, Warren Buffett, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, just the people I found interesting, Nietzsche, Plato, Socrates. I never made any of this. But what you have to do, I think, to be successful is you need to compile information and put it to where it works for you. So it might not work for someone else, but this is what I've found has worked for me. From Glen Abbey, I moved on, and Stephen Ames was the first guy that I coached on the PGA Tour. Stephen's from Trinidad, so he used to host the Stephen Ames Cup, where the top 12 kids from Trinidad would play against the top 12 kids from Canada, kind of in a Ryder Cup setting. And so he sat in on, they hired me for the week to coach these young kids from Trinidad who never had coaching. But my kids were becoming extremely good players, and even more so, people recognizing them as good people, which is more important to me anyways. And Stephen listened in or whatever, and I'd said some things he disagreed with, and we kind of had a little go. I was just like, you're telling me that the hands and arms are the most important part, and I'm telling you I have research that shows that that is not the case. So, and I said, look, you continue to do what you do, you're going to hurt your back. About a year and a half later, I got a call from Stephen saying, I'm going to give you 3 days. I've hurt my back like you said I would, and I want to know how I did it and how I can continue to play golf and not doing so. Because it was tough to make money, so in the winters, myself and Craig Davies, who's my partner on the road, we got together, and I listened to this chiropractor speak one day, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to change everything now because this guy's just completely empirically blown me out of the water with I'm not doing it right. And I thought I was doing pretty good, and I wasn't what I knew. This guy started telling me about motor function, neural function. If you can't fire certain muscle groups, it doesn't even matter if you're training them in the gym, if you can't fire them over certain planes of movement. It was teaching me about, sagittal planes and frontal planes and transverse planes and what my feet actually did. I just thought my feet were in shoes, but I didn't really understand that they were the keyboard to the computer. So your association with the ground is almost as important as your association with the club with your hands. So I started learning more and more about that, and basically I get like $10,000 in refunds that year because I knew I'd screwed some people up. I was like, just keep doing it, you'll get it, just keep with it, and it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening because I was completely wrong. So what I understood is, okay, well, I've had success, so do I have to get rid of all of that? No. Maybe these people who are being really successful, they just did that stuff naturally already. So I think I was just kind of window dressing. So having the ability to do that, move forward with Craig, and then Stephen came along, and we did it right here. I'll never forget. I've never been so nervous in my life. And then we're out the range, and I couldn't believe I'd never seen anyone hit it so good in my life. But in so many positions, I had already figured to be like not doable. You can't play golf. So that was eye-opening. But now, granted, you could hit the ball that way, but there was going to be a compromise, obviously, to what was his issues, his trail side back issues. So Craig and I used to make a little extra money. We used to put on clinics for chiropractors where we talk about the effect of the golf swing on the spine. Because we had all this information, but we weren't really doing anything. So at that point, we were just trying to pay our mortgage. And the funny thing is those days were so great. My wife and I were talking the other day, and there's been some things that have happened that are just, surreal and mind-blowing. But I remember when I was working 2 jobs, I did for about 3 years, where I taught golf during the morning and the daytime, and I waited tables and bartended at night. And she was working downtown in Toronto and trying to do her thing, to where we could barely cover our bills. And we used to just have such a blast there. And because the thing about adversity that you have to realize is that, you're never going to learn anything when life's going good. Like, I've never learned a single thing on vacation. You know what I mean? I'm just chilling, right? But I've learned a ton of stuff in kind of the valleys in my life. So adversity is just an opportunity. And shit starts to happen to us, and we're like, oh man, this sucks, this isn't good. No, this is like going to give you a PhD in something. So you have to look at it that way. Because what you realize is that there's no such thing as reality. Perception is reality. So whatever you perceive, whatever lens you look at life through, that's what you're going to see. So back in the day, I used to be super pessimistic. I'd meet someone who was a nice guy and be like, well, whatever, he wants something out of it. He might just be a nice guy. So about 21, I got to a point where I was about to turn pro. I was extremely depressed. I was in a society where I just could feel the bad energy and kind of the issue with all the race stuff. And it's not just towards me. This is just in general, period.